Yeah, Ahmed, right on time. Okay, so let's start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, and welcome to the panel of discussion. This is arranged by the Department of Municipality and Transport in Abu Dhabi. My name is Muhammad Asim. I work as an advisor to the chairman of the Department of Municipalities and Transport. We should call it DMT now. From now onwards, it's a long name. This department supports initiatives around transport innovation, policy alignment, and long-term city planning. I'm also glad to acknowledge my colleague Ahmed Al-Khaitiri from the Executive Affairs Office, who works closely across leaderships and government entities to ensure strategic coherence on the subject. When we talk about autonomous and advanced mobility, the conversation often jumps straight to the future. Fully driverless vehicles, intelligent cities, seamless transport ecosystems. Those visions are exciting, but today is not about distant possibilities. Today is about decisions. What we can deploy, what can be deployed now, and what needs more time and patience, and what Abu Dhabi might get right if it wants to lead responsibility. Whereas Abu Dhabi is in a rare position. It has modern infrastructure, strong governance, and clear strategic vision. That combination allows our Emirates to move beyond experimentation and towards a real scale. However, this approach can be described in 3 words: proactive, integrated, resilient. Proactive in anticipating regulation and safety before problems arise, integrated across infrastructure, data, policy, and operations, and resilient enough to adopt as technology, markets, and public expectations evolve. Today's discussion focuses on practical issues, realistic timelines, deployment based on actual readiness or rather than optimism, commercial sustainability, because solutions that we cannot stand on their own will not last, and regulatory readiness and alignment, both within Abu Dhabi and across the borders. In order to explore these topics, we are joined by an exceptional panel. So I would leave it to now colleagues to introduce themselves. Let's start with the lady, Dr. Nurhan.
Hi, everyone. It's always a pleasure, of course, is to communicate with renowned figures like every one of you. So I'm the Chief Ventures and Innovation Officer in Tactics Group. I had the chance is to work with the several governments and cities in the advanced mobility and autonomous mobility, specifically in advanced air mobility. And I had the chance, of course, is to meet Dr. Asim in Ajman Mobility Week, as well as, of course, is to work with ITC very closely. So thank you for having me with this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nurhan. Dr. Mohammed, can you also introduce yourself, please?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. My name is Mohammad Farhadi. I'm adjunct faculty at Arizona State University. At the same time, I'm a data science manager at Radius AI. I have been in touch with ITC in Abu Dhabi for multiple workshops on autonomous vehicle and also machine learning courses. So it's a pleasure to be here and have a meeting with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Dr. Khalid Al-Arabi, can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Greetings, first of all. Thank you very much, Mohammed, and it's a pleasure for me to be there. Well, I'm a professor in Cairo and Munich. I'm currently based in Munich. I was just reading a safety case of AV, so I'm and I come from the land of regulatory. So Germany is heavily regulated. So I would be very happy to give you a little bit of experience of how an AV model is deployed and how many hurdles do we have before we can go into a pilot level and let alone a commercial level So I think I can provide some European background. And okay, I'm a consultant to DG Move, so I'm an advisor to the European Commission in CCAM, which is the European flagship in Horizon 2020 for connected cooperative AVM systems. And I'm also working in reviewing all the deployments that are there. And so we are giving a regular monitoring of AV deployments around Europe, especially in Germany. So that's my place. So I'm in between OEMs and cities and municipalities. So could have a good thing.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Christopher, please.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yes, so good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Walton. I'm a Senior Director with Venture One, which is part of the Advanced Technology Research Council here in Abu Dhabi. My role in Venture One is to bring technology from the lab to the marketplace. In terms of my background and what enables me to do that, I previously spent the last 18 years in the aerospace and defence industry. In that time, I worked both in a technical capacity, starting my career as an engineer, later on in a management capacity. And in doing so, I've worked through the regulation, certification, and management of maintenance for a variety of aircraft, and have held posts in terms of being an accountable manager under EASA, FAA, and other airworthiness systems. So I come from a background of running businesses inside heavily regulated industries. It's a pleasure to talk with you all today.
Thank you, Christopher. That's a great introduction. All right, Mr. Muhammad, now it's your turn.
Thank you so much. All right, quick brief about me. I'm Muhammad Abdelal. I've been doing marketing for like the past 20 years. I'm the CMO for Tactics Group, and I had the pleasure to work with some of the UAE entities on advanced mobility early stages of the positioning and awareness in UAE and the Middle East and Africa, whether it's air, land, and sea. And also I had the chance to work from a marketing perspective on some of the real use cases of some of the eVTOLs and logistic drones, etc., etc.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you so much.
All right, then let's spin the wheel. So if I would like to start with Chris, let's hear from the industry. The golden question that we have at the moment is that what are the regularity gaps, big ones, between major markets here? We are having two visible markets in AV, which is the European market and the US market and the Chinese market. Then how would we be able to bridge these markets together in terms of autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we could talk at some length, but I think to draw out a couple of key points. I think the first thing to say is because the technology is radical, there's a temptation to reinvent the wheel. However, from the regulatory side, there are plenty of examples that we can lean on that we know to be effective and give us the inspiration to find the right approach going forward. I think from the aviation industry, one of the very good examples is there's a very good system of bilateral recognition. So that is to say, a company in the US could manufacture a product that meets a set of requirements in the US, and there exists a mechanism for that also to be recognized in Europe. And similarly, if you're an OEM in Europe, you can create a product to a defined standard, and there's a good system in place to recognize that between jurisdictions. So I think the first thing to say is we know technology and the rollout of technology is a highly global event. Technologies invented in a variety of jurisdictions are going to find their way. And in many ways, one of the huge advantages we have here in the UAE is that we can take the best of them. You know, we can look at the best technologies from different parts of the world and bring them together. So I think the first thing to say is there is no need to reinvent the wheel. There are mechanisms to allow us to do that. And our starting point, I think, should be to look there. I think then that fragmentation versus portability, you know, that's where it's worth directing a lot of thought on the regulatory side. The US can be a patchwork. The EU is more harmonized across the European Union. our advantage in this region is the ability to move faster. So we can have, I think, great clarity of direction, and we can really push through that quite quickly. I think the final thing I'd say from more an industrial perspective is two main insights I want to leave people with. The first thing to say is this is a regulated sector, but it should also be competitive. And that is to say, when we design policy and we map between the different jurisdictions, we should retain the ability for us to set absolute levels of safety. So we must regulate for safety, we must regulate for people being kept safe. And indeed, there's a role for government in owning infrastructure, the key things that all of the operations rely upon. But within that, the scope should still be there for competition on cost, on quality, on particular type of service. And so I think finding the right approach to bring together these fragmented jurisdictions, but retain the ability for business to compete is quite key. And then the final and second point on that is in designing regulation, be that for things that are, let's say, created here in the UAE, or the things that we bring in from partner countries, we should absolutely minimize the number of case-by-case regulations. So the reason I say that is the key to making us appealing to other technologies coming here, other businesses coming here, is to give great clarity on the route. So our regulations should be transparent and they should have clarity so that businesses can understand, okay, if I comply with steps 1, 2, 3, and I need to make myself open to auditing and I need to demonstrate evidence for these things, but if I follow the steps, that reaches a conclusion. I think one of the great challenges right now in Europe and the US is when you look through the regulatory frameworks, very quickly you get to a line that'll just say approved on a case-by-case basis. For a business, that's very hard to deal with. Is it 1 year, 2 years? Is it 100,000 dirham, 1 million dirham? You don't know until you start. And therefore, in the speed with which things roll out, I think that's where there's an opportunity for us here in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE to take a real lead.
Dr. Khalid, best of the best. That's what I like the most. So for GCC, what do you think, which is the best of the best?
Okay, let me, I like what Chris was just saying. You need to have a formal approval and certification process. Let me give you just a very short summary of what there is in Germany. It's the first European country with an L4 AV law. So it tells you exactly what you have to submit in terms of approvals. There has to be certifications, and theoretically it can take less than I think we can evaluate a safety case in less than 3 months or 4 months. And if there is a commercial operator of an AV that has already the certifications according to the law in Germany, he can lease his fleet, and we can very quickly develop a service as long as the safety case has been developed, etc. So he can lease the vehicles, he can lease the ROC, he can lease everything. Even the ODD is scaled accordingly. So I'm talking from roads. So for Germany, there is a path. And I'm sure that some of it is common in other places of the world. Although the US, I do have some friends in the US. I don't see such a rigor in the US as in Europe. So the rigor is, first of all, you have to have a vehicle and system type approval. So it has to go with all the UNEC, all the minimal risk maneuver, so all the vehicle and the system type approval. You can jump over that if you lease an already certified type approval vehicles out there. Then you have to do the ODD definition, the operation design domain, which is very important. In Europe, we put a lot of stress on the ODD because the ODD is very important and it needs to be certified. So we have a central authority in Germany that has to certify it. And this has to have the federal approval, but it's like a matrix, and you have to have all the full compliance. Once again, if the ODD has already been defined in a previous service, then you don't have a problem in jumping through. So I'm trying to tell you ways of somebody to implement a new service quickly. So it doesn't have to have this. Then you have to have a technical supervision, or what you guys call ROC or whatever, but there needs to be a technical supervisor. And a little bit, I don't see that a lot in the ROC in US, but I'm sure there is some sort of remote operation center. And I think it goes, of course, with aviation. So it's very, very important. And this ROC has to be certified, by the way. Then there is the safety case, which is mandatory. This is where I am at. So for each new introduction of AVM, the submittal of the safety case, there are a set of documents that has to be submitted, like a full ODD, hazard analysis, functional safety, SOTIP scenarios, KPIs, fallback validation, etc., etc. I don't want to trouble you. Then the local deployment approval. So we have to have a city or a municipality approval or the highway authority approval. Then you have to have the data security logging requirements, which is part of the ROC. Then you have to have, now this is something nice in Germany, which I like. You have to have an insurance to cover all the autonomous by the operator and the manufacturer. So the insurance has to be there prior to the getting the approval. Then you have to put the operational readiness. So all the fleet readiness, staff readiness, and you have to have a public communication prior to the deployment. Then you have a post-deployment, you have to regularly report, so the ROC should report the events, everything, all the incident, and you have to have annual review and audit of the AVM. This is rigorous, but I'm sure something around that, and even more than that, would be in the aviation sector and, of course, the maritime sector. Because we are talking here about aviation is zero safety, zero accidents. So we are very, very conscious about in aviation. So I would think that an approach like that is important. I know Europe is taken as the slow, and we are the turtles in the AVM deployment, and we don't have a commercial rollout. But hey, public, why are we having that? I mean, the theory is, the philosophy is, we have to have a public acceptance. And one accident that happens, or any of that gets exaggerated, and we are going to go back. So that is why we have this certification, validation, verification. I'm part of independent assessment team that is audited every year, and we are certified to assess safety cases, for example. All right, so that is why the regulation is sometimes burdensome for industry, but it gives you a very, very strong thing. And so the rollout from a pilot, from a test bed to a pilot to a full deployment, controlled environment, then a full commercial deployment is really not, is steps and is clear, but you cannot just go into a full commercial like some of the US firms are there. You don't just push robotaxis up in the mixed traffic with an ODD and a high-level verification. You can't do that in Europe. And I'm sure you cannot do that in a maritime level. And you cannot do that in the aircraft. So there are some drones, of course, in Europe. I'm talking about this. But also this is very heavily regulated because you have a European air traffic control system. And so you need to get all the verifications and certifications. So there are test beds, but I cannot even say that there are corridors that we can do. Maybe in Tallinn, in Estonia, in some of the peripheral areas. But I would be very careful but I think the regulation is there. And we can do that. For maritime vehicles, you have to sensorize the whole ships. And so you don't have a lot of fleets with high sensoric to put in the ships, because the ship age can be more than 30 years. So, you cannot just equip ships like that. So you think a rollout for road might be easier, but even in a place like Germany, it takes time before you have a commercial rollout. So if this can be part of how it is, why not in the Dubai or Abu Dhabi? Why not? Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Muhammad, now that's your specialty now. Question here is, how do we integrate safety into the ODD? Do we have to go for a baseline safety to begin with, or do we have to achieve a certain maturity level before we actually get into this ODD business?
Can I answer? Can I discuss about the previous discussion and then get back to your question?
Definitely, of course.
Yeah, because what Dr. Khalid and Christopher mentioned was very interesting. That's why I have some comment here before getting back to your question. Although my expertise, I'm more on academia and development, I have less experience on regulatory part. But Dr. Khalid also mentioned that US is more agile on the adaptation of the technology. So the way that Europe is moving toward adapting these autonomous vehicles, it's very similar to certifying aviation systems. But we should consider that this the system that autonomous vehicle are not that much deterministic system. So, and these are more related to machine learning. And what the aim of the autonomous vehicles is not to zero accident or improving 100% safety. They are aiming that we would be similar to humans or better than human a bit. So it's a bit, in my view, it's very hard at this stage to do 0 to 1 regulatory. European countries are doing it, but it is a bit causing the adaptation of autonomous vehicle. I'm 100% sure, for example, Waymo would not do no driver testing in Europe, but in Arizona, they are able to do it. At the same time, there is a risk factor. In Arizona, they have considered the ODD. They consider this place is a very, they would not face lots of challenges that they would face, for example, in a city like New York, in area weather condition and also the traffic, the model that people behave on the roads. So that's a better place to be adapted. And also the state by states have a different view on this regulatory. But I just want to say that very tough regulation would stop companies coming to and do adaptation. That's something that I want to mention. But yeah, go back to your question. Can you expand your question so I would be able to answer it? Yeah.
With pleasure. So we spoke about ODD. So Dr. Khalid mentioned the whole process of ODD and how it should evolve. Wanted to hear your opinion that where would the safety blend into, at what stage we should have safety be part of the ODD, and should it be a baseline safety or it should be
Absolutely.
at a certain maturity level?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the ODD is the play factor, a major player factor here, that key on all of these adaptation, all of these technology. I think the level 3, I think the Mercedes calls ODD for just a specific speed on a specific places. That's a risk factor that has been analyzed based on data that has been collected on the roadways on Germany. This study has been done on the Nevada and also in the US before considering a new technology. And also, you were in that class that we have discussion about it. When we are talking about ODD, we need to consider that what is the risk factor and how this technology that we are using on that environment would behave. So the number of situation and cases can be possible in each ODD. It would significantly affect the performance of autonomous vehicle. For example, the number of situation on cases that can happen in highway are significantly less compared to intersection. But at the same time, we discuss about it that the speed of the vehicle, the reaction time it's affecting the system, affecting the security effect on that specific ODD. The combination of these two should be considered at the base from the beginning before getting approval for any vehicle here. I hope that I answered your question.
Almost there. I like
Yeah.
your straightforward answer. I move to Dr. Nurhan. Dr. Nurhan, would you like to speak about this subject? Because I have a very interesting question for you on the commercial part. I leave it to you. Which one would you like to go in first?
Of course. So generally speaking, to extend when it comes to the maturity or the readiness of the governance part or a pillar for the advanced mobility or the autonomous, it's important to see the best practices, whether, as you mentioned in your introduction, there are the European market, there is the American market, also there is a China market. But now we see some other countries in different region, like UE, for example, is moving forward by seeing the best practices and the lessons. So to extend, I can say that the readiness with the governance and the processes and the policies to extend become in a way, in a nutshell, align. And the main concerns globally is the same, because one of the main things that the world now wants to move to is the commercial part. So we are in a very simple say, I can say, like, we moved beyond the if and when in this autonomous mobility in some countries to a mature markets that already entered into stage 2. And for the industry, generally speaking, by witness some sandboxes, some demonstration, and so on, we witness that we are in the era of only ability, commercial viability. So as for example, Dr. Khalid was mentioning about like what he likes in Germany when it comes to the insurance, for example. So it's also something which is really, really applicable in UE. I saw it myself, that has become part of, as Dr. Muhammad as well mentioning here about like the health and safety, which is really, really a main concern to everyone who's working in the autonomous industry, whether it is from air, land, and sea perspective. That's the first thing that everyone raise a flag and hand on it, because this is, in a way or another, will support positively or negatively to the public trust. So all this considered to be like the pre-stages, the pre-initial acts to enhance the concept of the commercialization or the viability of commercialization.
Perfect. Great answer. I like we have to go beyond if and when. That's the message that we carry here. So, Mr. Muhammad, based on your experience, would you like to highlight some aspects of such challenges that we have discussed now? And is there a way to get rid of some bottlenecks that we might face?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. As everyone spoke before, and the most important thing is the regulations and the safety, because now you are speaking with the audience very aware of everything. We are not introducing the cars. We are not introducing a new, transport as usual. So marketing playing a very important role in every industry, yes, indeed. But when it comes to a new industry, especially such a very advanced industry and technology, including safety and human lives, that's when marketing became a major factor for the success of penetration in any new region or country, for example. So as Dr. Khalid mentioned earlier, it's all about safety. So from a marketing perspective, we need to make sure that let's call it the audience for now accept the idea of a new era and a new autonomous mobility. And not this is to be done, not to be like normal methods of marketing and some ads, etc. No, you need to work hand by hand with the regulations and regulators, I mean, to reflect the vision and how, for example, UAE working towards making all the regulations needed, and not just that, no, they are working to be a benchmark for setting the regulations and safety to be not just ready for this industry, but to be a benchmark for this. And once you deliver this message to the audience and be transparent with what's the current stage we are in and what we're moving forward with, I believe this is how you reach the public acceptance, as we mentioned before.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed.
Welcome.
Sev, welcome. Thank you for joining. To give
Apologies,
you a
I
bit
think
of
it's
background.
ironic that I actually had technological problems to join this. So I'm very, very sorry about my 20-minute delay.
It's all right. You're just on time. Next time, please take a robo taxi. Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about regularity challenges. The right time for you to speak now, because we would like to hear your thoughts about any regularity risks that Abu Dhabi or GCC might have in adopting to the Chinese standard, to US standard, or European standard.
I think the first thing that kind of stands out, and my background is heavily on kind of risk and resilience in both the physical and technological spectrums. What I'm seeing is, think of the US, the EU, the GCC operating on completely different philosophies and approaches, right? So I'll give you an example here. The EU is highly stringent, right, on risk management, resilience, control, mandatory requirements that they then standardize and integrate across all of their operating frameworks, right? And then they've rolled that out globally. So GDPR would be a really good example of that, right? Kind of that unified framework. They then kind of released DORA a few years ago, which is the Digital kind of Operational Resilience Act. And then that's also been adopted by all other EU countries and Cyber Resilience Act and so forth. So there's a standardization of obligations. They've got requirements set in place, right? They've got I like to call it who has the biggest stick to beat market leaders and industries to comply with. And they have that centralized way of enforcing everything, right, with heavy penalties. The US is completely opposite, right? So the US is very fragmented, right? They lack that kind of overarching centralized driver, right? That statutory authority. It's all kind of very sector-led, market-led guidelines. You can comply with it, but the hows is up to you, right? What you need to achieve versus how you achieve it is completely up to you. So there's no to kind of Mohammed's point, there's no kind of real concrete benchmark. So it's harder to enforce, and there's kind of no real obligation to drive those requirements or set that benchmark. And then the GCCs then are complete hybrid, right? So they have that integrated approach nationally in each respective countries, but then you look at cross-border integration, that's not quite there yet. And I know with topics like this is an emerging kind of need, and also is a very notable one as well, right? When I go to conferences, there's a lot of I guess collaboration between the GCC countries, but that kind of last hurdle is that integration and on the hows, right? Not just the what's. So closing that gap, to be honest, I think the GCC are in a unique position because they're seeing what everybody else is doing, and they're going, I like a bit of that, I like a bit of that. That's good practice for us. That will work for us. So I think they are really quite in a kind of a similar to Singapore. They sit, they wait, they see how things are enforced and played out in respective regions, and they go, right, that worked, that didn't work, and they're learning live on kind of how to implement and roll things out in their own respective countries according to their laws. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, and I think that's kind of what the GCC approach at the moment I feel like is a really smart approach of how they are going to be doing this, and any other emerging trends such as the integration of cloud resilience, AI, and such.
I agree with you, Seth. Emerging trends have their challenges. Thank you for your answer. Now I have a question which I would first like to ask to my colleague Ahmad Khatiri, and then I'd give it to Chris to answer. It's more about what type of lessons we learn from other sectors or similar technologies which have successfully navigated all these regularity hurdles. Normally we speak about aviation in this case. So Ahmad, please help us to understand this.
With aviation, aviation as a sector, people usually look at aviation as the sector to compare to when it comes to self-driving vehicles or autonomous vehicles. And I mean, I understand why. I mean, it is the change in transport modes from all land and sea, and then you're adding a new layer to it. And it's similar with autonomous. But at the same time, I don't think people remember how aviation started. I mean, aviation didn't start with those restricted, very heavy and constrained regulations, right? It started with people entering the airport as if they're entering a common area like a mall or something. There are no security standards whatsoever. The technology was heavily subsidized by governments. They were very supported, and regulations became more restrictive and more constrained after certain incidents that happened. And I think we need to remember that with autonomous vehicles specifically, because I mean, we're comparing to the sector a lot, and Europe is taking a zero risk side of things. US is just going with the flow, I guess. It's not fair to compare directly. It's not apples and apples right now. We need to compare to how it used to be 40, 50, 60 years ago, and how people treated it as a new technology then, and adopt that, just so that we continue to enable, the autonomous vehicles technology. That's how I feel, but I'm sure Chris, the expert, will have.
I caught you by a surprise,
answer.
by the way. The use case that was in my head was the famous Concorde story, yeah? The plane which is still we are not there, the world is not there yet, but we kicked it off, and then we had to kick it off. Okay, Chris, over to you. I think you are an expert on the industry aspects. What lessons learned do you think we should consider here?
Yeah, I think, look, I'd agree with Ahmed's position there, I think to a degree. I would say over the last few years, I've gone on a bit of a journey. So I started in let's say, the heavy aerospace industry, deep regulation, very, very long development times. Safety is an absolute objective. Now, what I'd say I've gone on in the last few years is finding the right level at which to apply that. So there are some things that are managed in the aerospace industry today extremely well. And I think it is our job to find those things that work well and translate them across. By equal measure, there are some systems that we have today, systems of safety, systems of governance, that are the consequence of a patchwork quilt of things over 50 or 60 years, where we started with a suboptimal system, and we've sort of iterated things on top of it. You need only pick up some of the European regulations and look at the revision number and the number of revisions it's gone through, and I can see Dr. Khalid laughing there, because it is a continual thing. So I think for me, one of the lessons is practicality. We need to keep people safe. We cannot afford to have fatal accidents that were avoidable, because that will cease the interest in the backing of the technology. And I agree with Mohammed's point that we're into a particular phase now of we could call it marketing. So I think we need to pick the things which are most concerned with keeping people safe, but at the same time permit that innovation and recognize that the technology is not the technology we we've started from 50 years ago. I think on the industry side, that is also true of how companies set themselves up. So right now, autonomy is flushed with lots of companies that would describe themselves as lean startups. They're incredibly focused on producing a product, leading to a service, leading to a viable business. Now, a lot of those companies need to start thinking about the long term and how they make it quicker for themselves now they enter this mature phase. So just as a very sort of simple thought to finish my answer with, one of the things I see very little of is design for auditability from day one. So one of the biggest things we can take advantage of and take a lead on in the UAE is because we're a very fast moving, and have an ability to very much focus on the regulatory side. We have an ability to generate a lot of information and data very early. And if we think more about what does this look like in 5 years, and what are the things as a regulator and an insurer would you be interested in, and then for companies to bake that into their setup very early on, we can have an extremely strong ecosystem here that is exportable to elsewhere in the world, because it would be able to stand on a very rich amount of data that hopefully we would have developed from the ground up. So I've given you a mixture of things there, Mohammed, but hopefully somewhere in there there's some insights.
That's right. Maturity level is yet to be achieved, but then there has to be a plan. It's very clear. I think we had good discussion on the regularity part. Let's move ahead and talk about some real practical timelines for the deployment. So, Dr. Khalid, again, would you please help us to understand what could be most or major milestones, critical milestones in AV deployment roadmap? And would they differ across industries, especially because we are more focused on automotive, marine, and aviation? We are not there on the hybrid mode. Your thoughts, please.
I believe that Europe, and I will counter now that we have a low commercial rollout. I think V2X is very mature in Europe. So we have V2X and digital infrastructure. I'm sure digital twins are all over Europe. I mean, I'm in Munich now, and Munich has a digital twin. I'm sure Dubai is. I'm not so sure Abu Dhabi, but anyway, being a digital twin and having V2X and having 5G and all of that. So this digital infrastructure enables you to connect AV, okay, robotaxis are nice. But what about treating AVs as mobile sensors and integrating with public transport? In Europe, we have integration last mile and first mile with public transport. So, and there are commercial services in Paris, in Tallinn, in Hamburg. They are there and they operate in the shuttles, okay, albeit in a controlled environment. But I think that when you have a rollout, especially in logistics, so in Hamburg, let me give you, I was just reading a safety case of them, and they have already gone from pilot to operational to now they are trying to push it into a mixed traffic operation. And so they have this Hafen district in Hamburg, and they are doing logistics, and they are doing shuttle service or automated, and they are doing the delivery between the Deutsche Bahn and the logistics operators in Hamburg Port. So we have lots of things to give you, but I think beside the regulation, which is of course, and these people have already regulated and they already have certified AV vehicles. So there is a lot of horizon to go into other than robotaxis, and they go into added value. I would say in Hamburg, and when we go into CCAM deployments and we evaluate, it's not about AV deployment. We say, what added value can you bring? Can you do traffic management? Is it integrated with smart city service? Is it there? What is the system architecture? Of course, in Europe, we are system architecture. So we are looking at what added values, what data services, and so on and so on. So the more integrated with other digital infrastructure, the more integrated, then the better. Let me tell you a little bit also about Europe. Europe, in comparison to US, we have a strong L3, level 3. And so we went into from level 0 to level 1 to level 2, level 3, and now we are going to level 4. I've been asking my friends, what about level 3? Well, yeah, you know, Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, they have test pilots for L3 and so on. I said, no, I want to have L3 deployments. No, we go into level 4. I said, okay, fine. You know, but I think that there is room to learn, lessons learned. Now, what can we get from GCC? I would love to have a safety use case about a climate with dust, humidity, high temperature. This is not in Europe. You can put UAE, Dubai, as a test bed to invite other people to come and test their AVs. Why not? Think about that. You know, I love that. Look at Tallinn in Estonia. You know, Estonia is a very nice place. It's on the peripherals, but it's really a landmark, and it's the Wild West there. And so the regulations have been lightened a little bit in Estonia. Okay, but okay, within EU regulations and so on. But they have you don't need to have that. And so you can go and test anything and you can go there and you can lease any vehicles. You can go and test and do all the ODD and safety case validation and verification. Why not do that in Dubai? So I don't want to talk a lot, but you get the point. So there is a lot of lessons learned and practice that we can exchange between us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Talking about 5G, V2X, and digital twins could be good starters. Dr. Mohammad Farhadi, would you like anything to add to what Dr. Khalid has said on these starters?
Yeah, actually, I'm in with what Dr. Khalid mentioned. I'm a big fan of Europe, although I don't like their regulations, but I'm really big fan of their management system and their data collection, the system that the smart city that they have implemented. They are collecting data from all different type of sensors, from camera, temperature, and all of these are integrated. We don't have it in the US, and one of the reasons behind that is US cities are broke, so they don't have money to implement this kind of a structure. But it is very important, actually, in the aspects of data collection. V2X, I think we have discussed it before with you also. V2X, when we are providing information to autonomous vehicle, has a liability concerns on the government side that they are not that much interested in it. But on the data collection, which is very important, specifically when an incident happening. So one of the milestone before adapting this kind of technology would be have the infrastructure to collect data. For example, in the US, any incident happened for autonomous vehicle, they have 24 hours, 48 hours to send all of the information to regulator, to the government, so they can do a deep analysis. But it would be great if we have the capability that the infrastructure also gave us another type of view on then what happened really. Specifically on Abu Dhabi, there are extensive camera infrastructure that can provide it, that can be integrated on this system, and this data can be fused together. But I don't know about the data fusion, whether it's happening or not, whether there is any integration between these different sources of data to give a clear view of how this autonomous vehicle currently performing. Although no incidents happening, we are call it near misses. So on those near misses that we are able to capture with our camera, what was the reason why, for example, this accident was avoided by the human? Why the autonomous vehicle act in this way? So this need to be there. As I want to say that, yeah, in the US, unfortunately, we don't have it.
Absolutely correct. That's right. So data is the key. And we need to make sure that we have data, quality data, and we stitch it together. Dr. Nurhan.
Exactly.
Now we have heard so many things around this initiative. New thing, but how to make it sustainable? Is PPP the answer to this?
That's a very interesting part, because that's exactly what everyone now is thinking about, like how we move from this to commercialization, and is the keyword is the PP or this kind of relationship. But let me go for a specific thing where Dr. Khalid mentioned is related to the differences, what exactly happening in Europe, okay, and those companies or stakeholders. So let me give, if you allow me, Dr. Khalid, it's part of what I'm doing on daily basis, is that I'm advising the stakeholders, specifically the governments, in related to the main pillars for a sustainable ecosystem. So it's not about like having ecosystem where you go for the internet, get like 5-6 pillars everyone knows about, but also it's by training and learning from one country to the other. Depends on, number one, their own vision, their own strategy and readiness, whether it is the digital readiness or the infrastructure, whether it is also the digital infrastructure or the real infrastructure. So one of the things that I find is that you have like stakeholders playing in different areas, whether in the aside from the regulatory part or the procedures, but from the vertiports, for example, verti-hubs for the vehicle itself, the soft system, the AI, the cloud, the data, and everything. So it's kind of several parts, and you have to get all that as a puzzle to put it in one picture, and then you may take this an example to other countries, but also every time that you have to visit that to tailored, because as we mentioned, what is in Europe is a bit different than GCC. So what you really mentioned, which is very important, is the part of the temperature, the environment, the dust. So sometimes you introduce as an OEM, the one who owns the vehicle itself, whether it is for maritime, whether it is for land, whether it is for aircrafts, and you want to introduce it to another market or another environment like GCC. And you said like, okay, I do this this way, but you need to test it. You have to adopt that according to the environment and the aspects of it. So in this case, you are successful because, for example, one of the OEMs that I work with, they can fly in United States for the 35 minutes tour for sightseeing for a specific aircraft. But in GCC, specifically in Abu Dhabi, I cannot do it the same. Maybe because of the temperature, the sensitivity of the battery to that. So this is one of the things that we are working on. And we usually advise also the stakeholders on, okay, that's a bit different. Also, I'd love to highlight one more thing, which is related to governance and readiness of to move from one step to the other. We need laws, we need regulations, and so on. But we usually say, okay, that's very hard in Europe. They are very restrict. In the United States, a different approach. But this is in the very simplest way I can say. We have the common system, common legal system. We have the civil system. We have the Anglo-Saxon system. So in a very simplest way, I can say like having rules and regulations can be adopted because of the lesson learned, or because of best practices, or because of others started it. So we usually are not inventing the wheel. We just leverage that, because when we are talking about transportation, generally speaking, we have like a mature industry when it comes to transportation from a maritime perspective or aviation perspective. All that now has the umbrella of the international cooperation, whether from international conventions and treaties, where as a country I need to adopt and to match to reach the standardization That's first. Second is the institutionalization or the institutions like ICAO, IASA, and others when it comes to maritime and so on. So generally speaking, whenever we are working on enhancing the procedures and the laws inside, we remain in need for an international cooperation, whether it is to teach each others about like the differences in the environment and the testing and the demonstration between one city to the other, because it can be working in China, but it cannot be work in United States, as an example. Third thing, which is very important as a lesson to learn and to, actually not to learn it, but to take in consideration that we have the political aspects. Why can I, as a country, adopt the Chinese technology or the European technology or the American technology? And which country is good as consumer to that? So this is drive me to the question, Dr. Asim, you asked me about like commercialization. If the key word is the public-private partnership, I can tell you in a very nutshell, the PP, generally speaking, is one of the main things, because it can act as a stabilizers or a financial shock absorbers. I've been into this industry for long now, and I see you cannot depend on the stakeholders from a private sector only and or the public sector only. It should have like kind of alignment. What are the risk mitigation for both of them? If you understand what are the stakeholders for the whole ecosystem, when exactly the government should interfere, when exactly the private sector should interfere, you will in a very simplest way find the rule of sustainability and the benefit. So, for example, the risk mitigation for the public sectors and the governments, as we usually see, is the regulatory and the political risks, where most of the private sectors are focused more into innovation, into ideas, technical support, operational risks. But at the end, in some countries, and I experienced that in UAE, for example, whether it is Dubai, whether it is Abu Dhabi, the government has the will. So that's first. Second, it gives more incentives like the pilot projects or funding the pilots to be commercialized. But in this case, you have to understand again and to revisit every when and then for the private sector, who are the stakeholders that is much important fitting my environment, fitting my country more. So sometimes the adoption of, I didn't want to name like specific OEMs or companies, but you see, we said like if there is a viability for autonomous aircrafts now you see a very mature steps taken by Joby, for example, for commercializing in the upcoming Q2 or Q3. And I expect it's going to be by the end of 2026. I think it will not be able to be before that. But this is actually one of the mature steps. So PP is important, but also because of this industry is we are not creating something from scratch. We are leveraging that. We are leveraging by having technology and AI into this industry. We need to aware who are the players in the market. So we need to identify the needs as per the vision and the needs for that. And a quick example for that, you can tell me like, so how it can be like affordable for users, for end users, for example. I said to you, what is the priority for UE, for example? It's different than Rwanda. I've been into Rwanda, for example, and I see like they are building as well an ecosystem. So of course, what the approach of UE is a bit different than Egypt, is a bit different than see the viability first as a priority for a country like Rwanda can be last mile delivery for medical equipment. So that's, we called it the use case. So you have to identify that. In a very, very simplest way to conclude that, it is not about 5 main pillars for an ecosystem. I can take it from here, put it there, and I'd love to see like those players in the American market or the Chinese market. Can I bring them to the GCC? I can bring them to Europe. It is not this way. You should be more dedicated into what you need, what is your priority, and to advise as well the government when it comes to readiness, because I see like maturity in UAE, but also I can say like, okay, I can say more mature is to have, or actually more viable is to have air passengers taxi, or to work with logistics, which is can be. And one of the main pillars that play in your choice will be the public trust, for example. Of course, is to use a logistics drone. It is not like putting a couple of people in air taxi. So that's the way.
Public trust. That's all we are working for. I will ask this question to Mr. Muhammad and Chris, both of you, whosoever wants to take it first. Viability of a PPP model. Which mode do you think is more attractive when it comes to PPP incentives out of the 3 modes we are talking about, terrestrial, land, terrestrial, air, and marine?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think from my perspective, there's probably 3 things that come to mind about public-private partnerships, making sure they're sustainable, because there is the risk that they launch well, but fundamentally, if the commercial model fails to materialize, then all they are is the pilot project. So I think the first thing to say is, going back to an earlier point I made, the risk allocation is quite feasible. So there's a role for government in de-risking the public goods. So that is, the fundamental infrastructure, the unmanned traffic management network, for example, whereas private sector should compete on cost, service, and operational excellence. So I think public-private partnership gives a way to allocate those things quite effectively. I think the second thing to say is, and agreeing with the point that was just made there by Dr. Moser, is anchoring the demand strategy. So in Abu Dhabi, we have tourism growing at a great rate. We have academic campuses. There's the airport, business parks on Masdar and ADGM. So there's a possibility there for the government to very much articulate and anchor the demand, which gives you a good starting point for a very sustainable long-term commercial model, which is brought into life with the assistance of government through a public-private partnership. And I think then related to that, the final thing to say is to make it milestone-based. So it can't be an open-ended subsidy. That wouldn't incentivize people to go in the right direction on the first 2 points made. But by forming some milestones by which that public-private partnership starts in one place and transitions itself to a long-term viable piece of business, I think would work quite effectively. I think particularly given this is in many areas a frontier technology. So yes, the technology is in use in other places in the world, but actually in reality as a business model, we are all in a very similar place right now.
You have a point, Chris. Mr. Mohammed, would like to speak on this?
If you mean Muhammad, not Muhammad Farhadi.
Yes.
So
Muhammad Farhadi. Sorry, I've called Dr.
yeah,
Muhammad Farhadi.
I believe Chris
Abdillah.
said it all, and yeah, 100% I agree with what he said. Nothing more.
Great, no problems. Seb, now help us to de-risk the PPP models with too many challenges. I don't understand investing in a $250,000 taxi and then run it for free for a couple of years. Where is actually the juice for the PPP model here?
This is $1 million question, right? Because all we seem to find is there's a lot of case studies, but do we have case studies that have absolutely successfully end-to-end in that value chain kind of design, implemented, executed, and then maintained successfully, right, without a hiccup? Because I think it has been kind of noted, and I think I can't remember who noted this in earlier on, is that some of these things are very politically driven. So I have personally been on smart city projects where the funding, the interest, the appetite has been there, and then has dropped off the face of the earth after 3-4 years because there's a change in political interest, right? So they've had elections, and all of a sudden it's no longer the interest of that political party. So do you know what I mean? There's just external variables that will then determine the success, right? It's not just down to clear and solid funding, right? Clear and solid execution, and then having that kind of articulated PPP role, stakeholder roles and activities defined to get to that end goal. Sometimes it's completely out of one's control on the success factor of getting that to the end goal, right? Especially for these kind of longer term projects. One that I've just recently kind of rolled off of, actually, funny enough, is out in Saudi Arabia. They're building a brand new city, and you can see that investment fluctuates, therefore then funding fluctuates, therefore interest fluctuates, and a lot of this also is I would say reputational visibility driven as well, right? So I'm no longer looking at let's say more the tangibles. I'm looking at how the intangibles impact. To your point, is it worth the squeeze, right? So it's the intangibles that actually then also help dictate the viability of these things coming to fruition as well, right? So you'll see with NEOM, right, that they have downscaled, right, because of those variables. Other PIF related projects, now funding is now being pulled from certain Saudi vision goals into others, right? And that diversification and shift is natural. It's going to happen. It's not a set bar of we're going to do this. It's going to take this many years, and we're going to achieve it. And that's where the whole risk lies anyway. It's completely external. It's the intangibles, and I think that's why having an agile method in approaching this, regardless, needs to be the glue that binds all the moving pieces all together. And I know I may not give you enough kind of more operational detail behind that, but I know you've been involved in similar types of projects where sometimes all that money is pulled in and the outputs, to your point, are not what had been imagined or desired, right? In terms of those KPIs and those revenue goals as well in that generation.
That's true. Success of AV is in the value chain. I completely agree with your idea. When it comes to value chain, I have another esteemed guest, Dr. Judy from Middlesex University, Dubai. It's such a pleasure to have you here in this discussion panel, Dr. Judy. And I have to congratulate you because I have heard that the award-winning project by your students on the beach cleaning in an autonomous mode has been adopted by Dubai Municipality. So they took a lead, and we kept on looking on that. So congratulations. All right. So
Thank you.
You know, the topic of today is on autonomous vehicles. So we spoke about regularity aspects in the beginning of the presentation, also amazing points taken. And then we spoke about some realistic commercialization models, and PPP was one of the subjects. And then Sev came up with a brilliant idea of having a value chain. Do you think, other than the regular autonomous modes, is there anything else that can get into a value chain to make it more lucrative for public or for investor or even for government?
Yes. So the value includes also the human factor. So not only the technology, but who is running behind this technology and how to improve it day by day, year by year. So as an academic, I'm happy to see that today the academic side is not only watching, but actively involved in doing the research and improving the technology with local wisdom, I would say, because most of the technology probably coming from outside the UAE. But by involving the academics, the students, and the faculties, the researcher locally in the UAE, they understand the problem, they understand the environment. So hopefully we can have something that emerged locally and adopted with the need that we have over here, combined with the technology that we see have been implemented somewhere else. So the value will increase. That's my view, Dr. Asim.
That's true. Completely understand. And that's a message for our colleague Ahmed Al-Khatiri, being head of the Autonomous Vehicles Initiative here. Dr. Ahmed, do you believe that we have to add something in our bouquet of AVE initiative in terms of the human factor, academia to be the prime?
Honestly, considering our view and approach when it comes to looking at how others are adopting and taking this technology and moving with it, and then taking what we like from it, we definitely have the capabilities. We definitely have the human factor, and we definitely attract the right people here. Whether that will move to something that can multiply value in a way that's exported outside, I'm not sure. Mainly, it's a change in mentality, right? Because correct me if I'm going on a tangent that isn't relevant to the question. But if we look at how the UAE does things, and we've been importing technology, we've been importing a lot of things for as long as we've been created. And recently, we've started to think about exporting things outside, exporting with industrial, let's say, materials, products. It's a change in mentality that's taking time, and I'm sure we'll get to a point where we will export things, but or export value to the outside world. But I think we're in that transitional phase right now.
And what do you think, and
negative,
how long?
Maybe negative outlook on things, but I'm trying to be realistic here.
No, you should take a robotaxi when you come here. So how long do you think, Ahmed, because you are sitting on top of a practical initiative, how long do you think it will take, looking at all the risks that we spoke about, for Abu Dhabi to have a reasonable mix of an autonomous vehicle into the road infrastructure, vehicles, and transportation?
I'd say in terms of infrastructure, we're doing very well. Abu Dhabi has been well built, well maintained, and we didn't have a lack of funds that some American cities would have. So, alhamdulillah, we're doing very well in terms of infrastructure, and the upper level appetite is there when it comes to enabling new technologies. So we get to see that interest, and we get to see a lot of funds. We get to see a lot of blockers moving out of the way for this to be facilitated and enabled. So I don't think, okay, in terms of blockers for technology and for this technology to be spread, I don't think we will take that long. I mean, the goal is 2030 in Dubai and 2040 in Abu Dhabi. And I'm pretty certain that it will not be a surprise for most people in the UAE by 2028 to 2030 that it wouldn't surprise me if all of them saw at least one or two autonomous vehicles running around or drones flying around by then. We're in a transitional phase, and I think we're moving very fast, despite all the infrastructure challenges, despite all the regulatory challenges that a lot of you mentioned. We're taking those challenges and we're just driving through head on, I guess. Does that answer the question? Do you need me to elaborate on a certain point?
You've done great. I'll keep you a little bit more busy now. So value, we spoke about the value. Do you think there is a factor that we can bring in as a value is an integrated system? So I have something which has to go to a destination and it hops onto different modes of transportation. It could be human, it could be parcel, it could be a message. That's also considered as a value for the autonomous vehicles.
Of course, yes. What the doctor said about the European model where they use autonomous vehicles, shuttle services, or something like last mile passenger or last mile delivery situations, that's already kind of in the plan for Abu Dhabi mobility, I believe. And we see that with, even though there is a huge investment and interest in autonomous vehicles, you see that we're still working on getting metros and railways and investing in those kind of things, because we see mobility as an integrated system where you wouldn't rely on autonomous vehicles to take you from point A to point B, but more autonomous vehicles getting you to a central location that will allow you to take the metro and then an autonomous vehicle after. I think we are moving towards that ideal transportation model in a city, in not just this city, but also in Dubai and around the UAE as a whole.
Thank you, Ahmed. This could be my final question to you, Chris, and to the panel itself. So where do you see the manufacturers now complying with 3 different standards, supplying vehicles to different regions, and then make sure those vehicles are also having a good support model?
Yeah, I mean, I think whilst it sounds complex, what we see in the mature regulated industries is harmonization. So I think one of the things, going back to, I think in the very first question we discussed, is the ability for different regulatory authorities to recognize each other and for there to be a harmonization or a process by which bilateral recognition takes place will be key. So in your question, the sort of government side of the equation, what can government do to be supportive? I think that will be very important and should be a focus area as we reach the next level of maturity in the rollout of autonomous systems. On the private side, so what can industry do to help itself? I think this is where partnering is so key. Partnering between global OEMs and local operators. And so my hope would be that what we'll see in the future is there will inevitably be some key technology providers that end up being the best of the best. I'm sure it'll be a competitive market, but I also fully expect, like the aerospace industry, we shouldn't be surprised to see effective duopolies or something close to that. And that in that scenario, what I'd hope to see then is a segmentation where you have vehicle OEMs working in partnership with localized support entities. So I could well imagine you'd have an OEM producing platforms from the United States, from Europe, from China, that you'd have some entities that are fundamentally rooted here in Abu Dhabi that understand the local expectations in terms of regulation, in terms of vehicle maintenance, operations. And so I think that partnering, global OEM, local operator, and in many ways, this is exactly what we see with how airlines operate and maintenance organizations. And we see it in the automotive industry as well. So I would hope to see that sort of format develop. I think that's in the long term the most sustainable format. And it's also the format that creates the most opportunity for all of us. Everyone gets to eat in that scenario.
Very natural. I think so. That's how it should look like. And when it comes to enforcement, especially from European perspective, Dr. Khalid. How do you see use case vehicle hitting someone and someone dies? Who takes the ownership? Who's liable?
Well, in Europe, the liability is between the manufacturer and the operator. If it's a defect in the system, then it's the manufacturer. If it's the operator. If it's a defect in the vehicle itself, then it is. So there is a good liability and insurance framework in Europe. Now, coming back to what Chris was saying, let me give you about a global OEM. I mean, I'm sure of you. I don't want to be advertising, but Mercedes has an autopilot L3 in both Europe and in the US, and they are operating within UNEC R1. Sorry, okay, R1. This is my job as a regulation in Europe. R157, R155, or 156. These are global standards. So I'm sure, like in the aviation, we're not discussing here Chinese or any of that. These are global, and they have type approvals similar to that. The thing in the US is that they regulate after the deployment, but the standards are there. SAE, UNEC, all of that. There are, of course, specific standards for Europe and specific regulations, but the standards are there. So I think global OEMs, as Chris was saying, there are there. And I would like also to tell you about a thing or two of that Mercedes and BMW and all of that. I don't want to advertise, but they are building their own ROCs, you know, remote operation center. And then they are leasing with their vehicles, if you want. For example, like in Paris, they were doing the AVs in the Olympics, in Paris Olympics. So the Paris Olympics leased, rented AV from a certain company. Okay, let me not do more advertisement. And they leased the ROC also from them. So the OEMs are very, very good in that. They have certified vehicles. They have certified ROCs. They already have the ODDs because obviously it is certified, etc., etc., etc. And so the OEMs are very integrated together with the cities. The cities can go and lease and hire certain AV deployments, hire the ROC, and all they need to do is to do that. Another thing is very important is that there is what we call data logging from the ROC. The ROC is very European, I'm sure, but mostly, is that these data logs are shared. Now, sharing the data logs and sharing the events on a scale is very important for best practice and all of that. So CCAM, for example, as a European initiative, is very important that all deployments have to share their best practice, have to share that and to share that. I'm sure China doesn't have the sharing mentality as we do in Europe, but we get to learn from each other. One of the things are the business models also. So fleet as a service, logistic as a service, mobility as a service, all of these sort of service platforms and data monetization, etc., etc. How we go into smart city services, all of that is being implemented as part of CCAM together with the value added. And we do have several business models. So it's not one business model, by the way. It's not one PPP framework. They're very much different. It could be led by OEM. It could be led by the city in terms of traffic management. It could be led by the infrastructure. It could be led by whoever is owning the service or leasing or renting or doing that. So I want to say that PPP is not an easy subject. There is no universal business model for AV deployment. No way. And so depending on, and this is where a case by case, and this is where the type of service will be there. So, and by the way, in Europe, beside the operational readiness, we are having two things. Before you put out a deployment in a large scale level, you have to have a public acceptance and public awareness, and you have to have anticipated business model. So you need to put a business dimension or a value chain dimension inside your service before you are allowed to do it. And if you already have a test bed and a controlled environment deployment, you already should have demonstrated already the viability not only the technical, but also the commercial viability of that service from a pilot to a controlled environment up to full scale. So be careful. And I know you don't like European regulation, but there is a thing or two that we can help you with.
You got the point, Dr. Khalid. All right. This is a question to both ladies, Dr. Nurhan and Seth. Do you think it's safe to start with some sort of autonomous modes in freight market rather than jumping into people movement? Do you think it's a viable understanding, less risky, and it's going to have some results? Either of you can take a lead. Seb.
Honestly, this is not my area of expertise, funny enough. Focus on lots of other stuff. So not in particular in this particular mode of transport. So I will pass the mic to yourself to answer that question, I'm afraid.
No problem. Dr. Nuran would have a lot to say.
I think, Dr. Asim, it's a very critical, complex. There is no specific answer for this question, especially that we have, like, as we mentioned earlier, the risk mitigation and as also highlighted by Dr. Khalid, for example, the PP relationship is complex. There is no specific model. So when it comes to that, we are in the phase of, yes, second phase in some countries. Yes, the industry, generally speaking, in stage 2, where institutionalization is much aware. We had this kind of exchange of lesson learned, best practice, and so on, but there is no specific answer. And as we mentioned, everyone, whether they are the public sector or the private sector, I mean the stakeholders, the direct stakeholders and the indirect stakeholders are really taking a very careful steps, because a very minor incident in the autonomous industry, generally speaking, will delay that tens of years maybe. And like everyone should be careful while working, whether we are talking about like a private sector interference, whether we are talking about like technology and in labs, whether we talk about technology, infrastructure, readiness. I agree with Dr. Khalid as well when he said like UE is moving fast. We see like a very innovative and brave initiatives taken in Abu Dhabi as well as in Dubai. It's very clear. We witnessed demonstration, and now we are moving into sandbox. We see this kind of subsidized pilots in the sandbox by the government. But again, we should be careful with which one we needed now, where the government is putting their money, and how this will leverage the industry, generally speaking. And this is also has a kind of interaction to your question when it comes to is the revenue and the commercialization is coming from the AV itself. I can tell in a very simplest way, it is not about like a box with wheels. I can say it is not about that journey. It has two things. The first one is related to the direct activities related to the vehicles itself, whether it is hardware or software, but also there are some industries that will be reshaped, like the software services, for example, or SaaS. The APIs and the integration we will determine new terminologies for the AI when it comes to AI as a service. The traffic management, the dynamic mapping, also the insurance, for example, will be reshaped as an industry. It will not remain as we used to know about like insurance for incidents and vehicles like we used to have when it comes to the normal transportation. Data or monetization, generally speaking, as a concept, will be a very in a way of development. and deployment, as well as like data. And the question, of course, we can have like another session when it comes to data, whether it is the data collections, whether it is the processing, because this also will give you insights for your question when it comes to risks and safety is to deploy and so on. And I think also there are several countries, whether it is in Europe, and I experienced that with the UE, for example, when it comes to data privacy and the data storage and the rules of that. But also we still need for this kind of international cooperation, because we are not using 100% the technology that is coming from one source. So also, we still have the question mark when it comes to AI. We still have the question marks in related to which industry or technology, taking consideration regulations sometimes in Europe, but in some other countries, they say like we need to have actions on ground, so we may skip some steps. So it's kind of, as Dr. Khalid said, we need this kind of cooperation, lesson learned, OEMs and stakeholders, but every one of us at the end should be very, very careful to the steps is taken, because one mistake in this industry can lead us, all of us, whether the direct industries and direct activities to this or the indirect ones, to be behind and we return maybe to point less than zero.
That's what you have said. We speak about this every day, Ahmad. You remember, we say one accident takes us back almost a decade. This was a very interesting session, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate everybody attending this. And that's a beginner. Dr. Nuran mentioned it already. There's going to be more interactions, and this time we'd like to host you in Abu Dhabi. And I would have more face-to-face interactions to show you around as well. An excellent palace Ahmad Al-Khatiri has prepared in the DMT and ITC. Before we leave for today, I'd just like to spell out the key points that we have noticed today. Takeouts. ODD is a key factor of AV adaptation, but we have to beyond if and when. That's the first point. I think that's, we have to take it away. The GCC has to choose the best of the best, but safety is prime. It's not about Europe, it's not about US, but it's about safety of those who are going to use the technology. Maturity level is yet to be achieved, but then there has to be a plan as well. We cannot keep talking about when we will achieve this and when we do that. 5G, V2X, and digital twins could be good starters, but data is the key. So without data, all of these models, beautiful platforms will not mean anything to us. Sustainability of AV ecosystem is in the alignment between public and private sectors. And there needs to be a push and pull from both sides. Success of AV is in the value chain. That's a very important point. We have to understand that if we need to be successful, there has to be a value chain. AV is AV, it's fantasy, but human factor is most important. After funds, Mr. Ahmed. So you can choose, it's a human factor or funds, but both are important. I'd like to thank you again. And we keep meeting and appreciate your contribution. Thank you. Recording of this session I will share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Nurhan, Mohammed, Dr.
Pleasure.
Khalid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Ahmed, Dr. Judy, say bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.